Chapter 3. Relearning How to Learn, Rewiring My Brain. The minute my plane touched down in Montreal, doubts about my ability to readapt to school after my year of so-called partying in Israel began to creep back. Thinking about re-entering academic life at Dawson College, I was unpleasantly reminded of my challenges in the classrooms of my childhood. This time, however, I wasn't going to let myself fall back into old habits. I was ready to be serious, and deep down I knew that I had what it took to compete in the academic world. While I was aware that I was behind many students my age, I wasn't expecting how much work was required to actually catch up to them. I believed that my fairly extensive experience with building computers would help me get a head start in this domain. Boy, was I wrong. Although my natural instinct for computer science offset some of my disadvantages, being able to recognize computer components and knowing how they fit together was far from enough. In fact, to my complete surprise, I knew next to nothing. With respect to knowledge and skill set, physically building computers had absolutely no common ground with programming. To add salt to the wound, the computer science course was notorious for having a 65% fail rate for the first year, and failing any course in my program meant losing an entire year. It was intimidating to say the least. Not only did I have to learn everything from scratch, but I also had to remain beyond cautious to avoid any slips in my grades. Despite its high fail rate, computer science wasn't even the principal bane of my college existence. You see, the great thing about computer science is that even if you know nothing going into it, you are surrounded by other students who are, for the most part, just as clueless as you about the subject. Basically, you enter the course pretty much on equal footing with everyone else. That's because the program doesn't expect you to have prior knowledge or prerequisites. All of the basic concepts were taught right then and there in that year. It helped that I had a great mentor to look up to, my computer science professor, Alex Simonellis, who navigated Java with incomparable skill, and I admired his confidence and wisdom. His impeccable skill and knowledge of the subject inspired the hope in me that one day I might reach his level of competency on any subject. I also found out that I had a natural talent for it. So, while I wouldn't say that computer science was a breeze, it was pale in comparison to the real challenge of the semester, which was math. I was enrolled in Calculus 1, but it wasn't just calculus that I had to worry about. In fact, the time had come for me to confront a problem that had been haunting me for years. I had never been formally taught math. All of those years of skipping of math class to attend the specialized GEM program for ADHD had finally taken their toll. I was far behind in algebra and had little to no structural understanding of mathematics as a whole, let alone everything else that calculus required. Again, my ADHD had dug me into a deep hole, and I wasn't sure I would be able to get out of it. If you've taken a math course of any kind, and most of us have, even if it was back in elementary or high school, then you know that mathematics is a subject that relies on cumulative knowledge acquired over time. This means that each new level of math is meant to build on the concepts that came before. That is why you learn to add after you learn to count, why multiplication and division follow addition and subtraction, why algebra comes after multiplication and division, and so on and so forth. That is, in theory, how most students are supposed to experience learning math. By the time these regular students get to college, even if they were never geniuses at math to begin with, they are arriving with years of experience in the subject. Concepts they don't even realize they've been exposed to are lurking in their brains, waiting to be reactivated and acted on. For normal students, that was the case, but I had none of that. So there I was, with zero understanding of basic algebraic operations, in a classroom at Dawson College, watching incomprehensibly as my professor explained trigonometric derivatives. I was screwed. I couldn't see how I was going to learn everything in the span of a few months, and the prospect of having to do that was overwhelming. I was completely in despair. In an attempt to catch up, I began spending entire days in the library, struggling to absorb the basics. Every morning, I left my house first thing in the morning when Dawson's libraries opened and arrived home on the last bus, barely able to keep my eyes open, with my head swirling with a tangle of numbers and confused equations. Some days it seemed that my only interactions with friends or family was the food my parents left me outside of my bedroom door to take the following day to the library. The carefree days of breakdancing in Israel only a few weeks earlier felt like a world apart. I considered quitting. I had every reason to. Looking back on my life, my religious upbringing, my very frugal education, my aggressive ADHD, the 1-year gap I had spent in Israel, it would have been easy for me to throw my hands up and decide that I wasn't going to make it through Dawson's computer science and Calculus 1 courses. I grew up being told that Jewish people are smart because they study God's Word, that hours of Bible studies are the way to get ahead of everyone else. But here I was, staring down the hard truth, seeing all of my deficiencies and the problems with my background, and contemplating what seemed like an impossible future. I didn't know it then, but this would be a major turning point in my life. In the end, I didn't give up. Instead, I would soon find out that, even with all of my shortcomings, I not only had what it took to pass those courses, but to master them. I would even come to love these subjects over time. I just had to engineer a solution for myself first. Enter Simon Laboot. Simon was 2 years younger than me, but worlds ahead in so many ways. At the age of 17, having just graduated high school, he was something of a mathematics prodigy, an expert in calculus 1 and 2, as well as multivariable calculus, linear algebra, physics mechanics, and electricity and magnetism. He walked into my life like an answered prayer. I hired Simon to be my tutor, paying him for his time several hours a week with the money I made through a side gig. While I met with him at different times, he was mainly available on weekends. This created a somewhat awkward conflict, as the day we would often meet, Saturday, was Shabbat in my community. During Shabbat, the day of the week during which Jewish people traditionally observe a day of rest, the members of my community were practically Amish for 25 hours. On those days, I was forbidden to do any work and couldn't be seen leaving my house with a school bag or cell phone. So, meeting with Simon to study required a little bit of carefully maneuvering around the rules. On Fridays, I hid my clothes in a nearby park or somewhere outside my house, and the following day, I'd tell my parents that I was going to see a friend. On the way, I would pick up my clothes and take a discreet route to a coffee shop outside my community. There I would change, and Simon would meet me with his laptop, notes, pen, and paper. Each session with Simon was an exercise in information overload. He drowned me in knowledge and drilled equation after equation into my brain to catch me up to speed with everyone else. Simon was sharp and honest with me, and day after day he pounded away at my weaknesses and shortcomings. He wasn't shy about telling me what I needed to hear, and he had my full attention. Every time I met with Simon, I would leave feeling mentally exhausted. Some days the sessions went on for so long that I started missing afternoon prayers on the Sabbath. My mom began to suspect I was not at a friend's house as I claimed, but little did she know that all I cared about was school. Simon's help and the long hours I spent in the library began to pay off. I had also stopped attending classes upon the realization that I was not going to get anywhere if I spent my days in a large room with 100 other students, listening to professors lecture on concepts I could learn more efficiently on my own. It was also no use fighting with my ADHD. I was who I was, and the classroom simply wasn't designed for me. Instead, I asked my friends to loan me their notes, and then met with Simon or worked through them on my own. By using these strategies, I found that my grades only kept improving. I passed every one of my courses, computer science and calculus I included. It felt amazing. I had never worked so hard for anything in my life, but the experience opened my eyes. Now I knew how much I was truly capable of accomplishing in a short period of time. That first semester at Dawson College taught me the key to success. Don't give up. Parts of Dawson, especially at the beginning, included some of the darkest moments of my young adult life. It was often hard for me to imagine passing any of my courses when it was clear I was years behind everyone else. Many nights I came home on the last bus, wondering whether I had learned or accomplished anything that day, despite poring over books for hours in the library. Studying also meant sacrificing time with family and friends, a drastic change, of course, after the socially active lifestyle I had enjoyed in Israel. But these dark moments also led to striking revelations. I realized that what I needed was a tutor, not a professor's dull recitations of complex and abstract concepts to a lecture hall full of people. Time became a precious asset. Knowing all I could learn and do in just a few short months, I began to see time as a valuable type of currency, and I began to use it in that way. I also came to understand that an unfair playing field isn't a good enough excuse to give up. Instead, it presented an opportunity. When the odds were stacked against me, I chose to hunker down and hone my skills. Re-emerging from this trial many months later, I was a completely different person, with the skills, mindset, and grit to outcompete those around me. I had undergone a complete transformation from the breakdancer yeshiva boy of only 6 months ago. The years passed in a blur of consistent academic achievement after that, and soon I was in my senior year of college. The size of my classes had shrunk from over 100 students to just under 15. By this time, I was confident about my abilities to learn the material on my own. I had mastered all of my math courses, including calculus and linear algebra, and defeated the demons that had plagued me ever since my childhood. However, My strategy of missing class and only showing up for exams had begun to wear out. In fact, the dean even made me sign a contract saying that I would attend my courses or be kicked out of the classroom. If I even arrived at a class 5 minutes late, I would not be allowed to enter. For once, I went along with the normal routine. It didn't bother me as much. Somehow, I already knew my time in Montreal was coming to an end.